Hey everyone, today I want to share with you two of probably my first games ever back into OTB, which means over the board chess play, since, 5 years. This wasn't rated, but this was slow games. These two games were played very slowly and like you have an unlimited time for your moves. And yeah, I played somebody of around 1800 level, which is a good way for me to get back into that 3D type of landscape. And so here are the games. The first game went really bad for both sides. I mean, I had 2 blunders, 2 misses, 3 mistakes. By the way, I'm a little bit sick, that's why you might hear me being nasal right now. And my opponent had 1 blunder, 3 misses, and 3 mistakes as well. That was the first game. The second game went a bit better for me, but these are the 2 games. They were really interesting games. That's why I'm really showing them to you. They weren't broadcasted live. I'm really just in my room remembering these 2 games, and I wanted to show them to you just to share, see if you enjoy. So we started off the game. I have the black pieces in this game, and I wanted to kind of stun my opponent, play something I've never played before really, and that's the annoying b6. Now, the Owen's defense, this is called, is really a bad opening, but you know what? It's really annoying to play against because, you know, black established some nice things. It's a hyper-modern opening, which means that black gives the center essentially to the white pieces, right? And in exchange, we're going to be attacking the center later on and trying to get that center for ourselves. Now here, I don't even know theory. Like, I have zero knowledge of this opening. This was not prep, none of that. And so I should have done d6, I think, is the opening move, like the theory move. But I go for d5 here. And d5 is so-so. I mean, it really just translates into a French defense with your f, e, and d pawn that are kind of like this, super French defense-esque. And so from this, I kind of look and see, and my memory kind of does this thing where I do, okay, we do c5 in the French defense, kind of looking at those common themes in the French defense. Pushing c5 is very, very likely. And certainly that c3 reply as well. And so here I just developed my knight e7, and after bishop c2 here played by my opponent, this was a little bit dubious, even for me during the game. And maybe it's to play queen d3 and attack h7 once I'm castled, but this is super premature. It's not really a good move, because really this bishop allows me to gain this diagonal with bishop a6. And this is not a move that I could have done before. Let's say any other move by white before, if I ever try to trade bishops off with bishop a6, I run into this tactic in which I lose a knight after this trade, and queen a4 check wins a piece here. My knight is just done. So when bishop c2 is played, I have the availability to play bishop a6, and if you ever come back, then I trade off your great bishop against mine. This bishop is known to be bad in the French defense, so always know those kinds of concepts. And in the meantime, I am taking out your castling possibilities. And so here, my opponent continues with knight d2. Again, kind of a dubious plan. This knight trajectory is very medium, especially that it just strengthens my bishop's diagonal, right? There's a less control over this d3 square, and overall I just don't like knight d2, right? And it doesn't fix any of these castling rights either. So I go knight bd7, and then I go knight c6. Seeing these knights go like this in the French defense, also very common, and the goal here, exactly as the game review says, is to go rook c8 eventually and open up the c file for some counter-attacking chances on like the opponent's entering squares on c2 and c1. So knight g3 is played, I play rook c8, just following my plan. I plan to one day open this up and go with a compelling knight b4. And here my opponent plays a mystery of a move, knight g5. What is knight g5? What does this threaten? And this is where you need to read into your opponent's thoughts and kind of predict what their idea is. What are they threatening here? And I looked for a long time. I would say this move probably took me 7 minutes. I looked at knight takes f7 first, and I also looked at knight takes e6. Now, if I look properly, let's say if I do any move here, say this is what I played in the game. But let's say knight takes f7, it's good to calculate this before you move, right? So if takes, I saw queen h5, and then I saw g6. And this is overall okay for the black pieces, because if bishop takes, I have h takes, and now queen takes h8. And here, materially speaking, I'm doing super well, right? I'm completely winning in this position. I have 2 minor pieces and a couple pawns for the rook that is given. Super, super winning. And so I also calculated knight takes e6, which was played in the game eventually. And this is fairly good for the black pieces, right? Even though this was played, I calculated through, and although it looks kind of ugly, it's better for the black pieces. We have a material advantage and the white pieces are moved out, right? So I calculated f takes, queen h5. By the way, this happened word for word, bar for bar in the game, which I was super pleased about, because it's your thought, your ink on paper, or your head on paper, whatever the expression goes. And so I had calculated king e7, bishop g5, and now knight f6. If I don't play knight f6, first of all, it's mate, so I have to, but also, like, they win my queen. So knight f6 takes, and then g takes f6. And at this point in the game, I'm 2 pawns up, and I have tempo. I'm attacking this bishop and forcing it to go back. And in this position, I had evaluated in my mind that this was better for the black pieces, which it is, so I'm happy. And so here I want to conserve my advantage because I have a pawn on d4, so I just take on c3 once. And here I have really good alternatives, queen d6, queen c7, just mobilizing my pieces and activating them while building out a strong center, and eventually my king can go to safety, maybe king f7. But I was impatient here, and I really wanted my king to go to safety on f7 immediately. So I played the really big blunder, queen e8. It's not really a blunder as shows here, but it really is for the position it shows. And I'll tell you the way to escape this after the deed is done, but it's really hard to detect. So queen e8, it offers a queen trade and potentially, you know, gains your tempo on the white pieces if they go back, but they didn't. They take here, and now poses the question, right? Because if you take with the rook, there's knight h5, and now this is doubly threatened, and there's no way to defend this f6 pawn. And if you take with the king, well, then there's bishop takes f6 on tempo on the rook, and this is disturbing. So here there's knight h5, and the way to defend this, you guys, is really incredible. It's king f7, and king f7 here still allows you to take the pawn, but here is the deal. After knight takes f6, we have rook c8, and somehow giving this pawn is completely fine, because the black pieces will most likely recuperate this dead pawn on c3 with like something like knight e5 or knight a5, and the discovery on c3 will be apparent, and it's tough to save this pawn. Just say a variation here, we'll go knight e5 attacking this pawn. If king defends, then we just have like bishop e7 also wins a piece, but I also thought like knight c4 things, and black just has an awesome position here. If bishop takes f6 attacking this rook, oddly enough, this is even better for the black pieces, because here we mobilize the rook attacking g1, and okay, here if you defend with g3, then we have rook g6 attacking this bishop, and the bishop doesn't have really nice squares to go to. If the bishop goes, oh, first of all, you're sacking a rook. I forgot that this was a brilliant move. If bishop takes, then you take here, and you're attacking 2 pieces, and white is going to lose another minor piece, so this is no good. And if you go bishop d4, say something like this, rook g5 attacks this knight, knight goes to f4, then we have e5, right? So this is no bueno, and the fork would win a piece as well. And here, the white pieces are kind of forced to defend this knight at this miserable spot, and now the computer evaluates takes, and here we would have bishop b4 checkmate. What a variation. So this is what happened in the game. They took, and I took with the rook, and after knight h5, I played king d6. You know, I just wanted to escape the overall pending threat, bishop takes f6, check on my king, and winning this rook. So I just said, you know what, screw it, we'll just activate our king, and after bishop takes f6, wasn't the best of the moves, rook g8, and then my opponent played kind of well. I mean, this is a double kind of threat here. White is threatening this fork with the removal tactic bishop h4, kind of sneaky, and this, you know, would let me give an exchange. I don't want this. And also this rook takes g2 does not work, because white have a nice resource, bishop g3 check. I have to block, let's say e5, and now bishop f5. And the white pieces are coming in with bishop h3, trapping my rook successfully, and that's why I didn't go for that there. Instead, I played rook c8, really going upon my opponent's weaknesses. You just gotta attack those weaknesses. But then there was check, and okay, bishop f5 was quite good. Really good, actually. It attacks my rook, and I just don't know what to do. So here, I decided to take a leap, take a risk. And this is where it's very interesting in the game, because I don't have to do this. I could play rook c7, though I didn't like this move because of knight f6, attacking my rook and threatening knight e8 check, winning the exchange, right? Very scary. But black have rook f7 here, which is very hard to see, and also very winning. And here, if you take my rook on g8, it looks free. We take this bishop, so now we're down the exchange, and your knight is trapped. So we'll eventually win 2 minor pieces for the rook, which is advantageous for the black pieces. And so, having not seen all that, I played bishop h6. It's a blunder, but here it's equal. The position is equal, it's 0.00. What I'm doing here is that I'm sacking the exchange. I am sacrificing the rook against this bishop in order to get the bishop pair that is very vibrant on both of these diagonals. And you'll just see how awesome this bishop pair ends up being in the game. It's really insane. So my opponent immediately takes the exchange and now plays f4, attacking my beautiful center. And so here I play the risky e4. It's a bad move. It allows a lot of play for the white pieces. Instead, I should have played king e6, but I really didn't want to play that because it kind of lets them take a hit into my nice pawn structure. I really wanted to get a protected pass pawn and take on this check here. I saw this in advance, and here I really didn't want to play the better king e7 because of f6 check, king f7, and here I just didn't want to give too much juice to my opponent. Even though here I had seen that white has no checks, and I just didn't wanted to pursue this. Instead, I played this weird block. Okay, it puts my piece in a pin, which is never good. But I said, you know what? I'm blocking this bishop, and I'm at the same time attacking c3. This is pretty good. White, on the other hand, cannot defend c3. No king d2 because of the bishop on h6 taking up that square. No rook c1 because of this bishop on h6 taking up that square. And I said, you know what, it's worth it. It's worth it because we're going to win this pawn, and we're going to have 2 pass pawns here, and that's going to be the best part of the game. And so here after bishop f4, trying to trade off one of my 2 bishops. They're too good. They really are. Here my bishops are taking up everywhere this king and these 2 rooks could go to. These rooks cannot activate into this game because of my 2 bishops. And so the worthwhile of them to just trade off one of my 2 bishops is so high. And so bishop f4 kind of forces this, but I was fine with this. I was fine with trading the bishop pair because I get this pawn finally, and now I get to activate my 2 pass pawns. Rook d1 attacks my pawn, and bishop c4, a super neat defensive move that also attacks here. And while keeping my bishop on this diagonal, restricting the king and restricting the rook's development on f1. Now, white should have played something like f6. Keeping my knight on this f7 square and just overall keeping something that restricts my black pieces. They did no such thing. Here, the blunder rook d2 cost them the game, because it just allows me to improve my position aimlessly. The rook cannot move, let's say, cannot move on this second rank, because I have checkmate on c1. So they have to move back. Now you just wasted time and gave me time. And so here I play bishop takes a2. It's not that good, because perhaps it allows rook f1 and some development of that rook. I really wanted to do this, however, to get 2 more pass pawns. A little bit greedy. Don't be too greedy in chess. Another good lesson there. h3, and then I saw what my opponent's plan was to defend this f5 pawn with this g4 march, and say no more. I had to play bishop c4 quickly, as if I didn't know what my opponent was playing, and after g4 defending f5, I have the beautiful knight f3 checkmate. Thank you for listening to game 1. Here is game 2, much more exciting and attacking. The second game we played was much shorter, was a really explosive attacking game, and I even had a brilliant move at the end, so it's really worth the watch, in my personal opinion. So I had the white pieces this time. I started with e4, c5, and now we're going into a Sicilian with e6, right? So this is called the Taimanov, or the French defense variation. Okay, so d4, c takes, and knight takes, and now a6. And this is the con variation of the Sicilian defense. I go bishop d3, and now queen c7. After developing this bishop, I go knight b3, a very interesting move in which I try to block off the black piece's possibility for their bishop to go to c5 and essentially acquire this super good diagonal in this type of Sicilian. So knight b3 is a super beneficial move. And now after knight f6, I know a bit what black wants to do. With knight f6, they're promoting the d5 square, right? By targeting it, right? By securing it. So I'm kind of anticipating d5 here, and I immediately play f4. Really aggressive attacking move. Basically meeting a d5 with e5 immediately. Attacking this knight, knight d7, etc. And we would have a lot of space. My opponent played d6, to which I played castles. Castles, okay, it's an inaccurate move apparently. c4 was best, but I don't really want to do a Maroczy bind here. After bishop e7, I go knight c3, and now castles. And here, I play kind of a new thing I've been trying here and there, and it's kind of been working out for me. g4 in these types of position. So g4 is a really, really aggressive move. Like, I'm telling my opponent, look, we've castled on the same side, but I'm still attacking your king fully fledged, and using this defense of the g4 square, I'm just going to play g5 and bring my queen to h5 and even maybe a rook lift to h3. All of these things do happen in the game, by the way, which is that much better. And on d5, trying to explode the center, open up the center, which is what you're supposed to do when your opponent is attacking you. I close the center. I try to close it anyways. e5 is a better move, just closing here. But I played g5 first because I had calculated that on d takes. So let's say if the knight moves out, I think I just have like, oh no, actually I win a pawn, right? I win a pawn on d5, e takes, and knight takes here. And white is winning. Fair to say, right? So black have to take here on e4, and I liked this force variation type of thing. So I took on f6, which is a great move, and now bishop c5. You see, if black takes my bishop immediately, I take their bishop attacking a rook with check, and forcing queen takes, or rook e8, and here I'm up a full piece. So this is not possible, and it forces bishop c5. And I really like this variation because after king h1, and now we're back to equal, here, the white pieces have a few elements that makes me really love this position. And one of those is the open g-file on this king and the presence of a very valuable pawn, this f6 pawn. The diamond that is going to pierce into the black piece's position. And this is going to be the winning element for me in this game. You'll see. I really also like this tempo move knight e4. So knight e4 attacks this bishop a second time and allows me to get a knight into my attack surplus to this pawn. So we have a pawn, we have a knight, we'll need a couple extra pieces into the attack to make this work. So the bishop goes back to a7, and now I go queen g4 threatening mate. I'm telling my opponent, with the move on the board, this is serious. It forces g7, g6. g6 defends mate, and now I play queen g5. Very interesting move. By the way, from here on, you see the eval bar, it's very winning for the white pieces because I'm threatening queen h6, and it's super hard to defend this. There's a forced mate threat on g7, and this overall is very difficult to defend. The only move here that my opponent found, and that was the only move, is queen c6, attacking this knight, and more than that, threatening checkmated too. If I do whatever move, this is checkmate here. Rook f3, oh, it's not actually checkmate immediately, there's queen g2, but there's checkmate here, right? Just because of the weakness of my king and of the strength of their diagonals. So here I saw this coming and I took here on d3, defending my knight. And so now after knight d7, I had not seen knight d7. I was pretty angry about this after the game because if I miss anything here, defense-wise for black, like, I have huge weaknesses to deal with. So always look at your opponent's resources. I had really just seen that this was over for the black pieces, but no, there's a small resource, knight d7. It's completely losing still, but it's a resource. Can you find what white has here? Pause the video to solve the problem. White to play and win. There's only one winning move, which is so nice to see, right? So here I can't exactly play queen h6, threatening checkmate because of knight takes f6, and this is the resource at hand. You see, going about my knight that is pinned, you can now take f6 without me having to be able to take this knight. And so here I went rook f3, which does two things at once. Number one, I'm doing a rook lift, right? So I'm doing rook f3 to go rook h3 one day. And number two, I am taking out from this pin. So that now, let's say you play anything on the board, I have queen h6 for real this time, threatening mate, and if you take on f6, I take here with check, super important. Because now you can't take with checkmate on f3 because it's check and the king would have to move and now I have checkmate. So the threat is now reinvigorated, and here black has no better option than to take on f6. Take on f6 and erases a lot of the mate threats, but the white pieces are up a full piece. My opponent didn't play that, they played the mistake king h8, and from here on out, it's pretty much a forced win all the way from here on out. And so here I played queen h6, which I can do now, because if you take on f6, this was not played in the game, I don't have check this, right? I don't have check here because you have mate. But I do have queen takes f8. You see, this knight stops defending this rook, as did this king when it moved to h8, and so now the rook is left undefended. And after queen takes f8 check, we win a full rook, and it's pretty over. In fact, here the engine gives such a beautiful move, f5, which I don't even know what this does. f5 seemingly gives whatever and whatnot. Oh, I see, it's to open up this bishop. Yeah, it's really nice, actually. So whatever black does, let's say g takes f5, I really like bishop h6. It's threatening checkmate. On g7, I don't know how to fix this. There's no way to defend. There's also rook g3 in this variation because you have opened the g file, and this is just mate threat that you cannot defend. So f5 is a really pretty move. And so here my opponent made the mistake to, well, it's not the mistake, it's the pretty much there's not really many moves here. Rook g8 defends mate. It's the only move that defends mate. And can you see what I played in this position? Pause the video to solve, white to play and win. I played queen takes h7 check, sacrificing my queen. And so here you have no choice but to take back. My opponent resigned here, but if you take back the queen, it's forced. We have rook h3 checkmate. I hope you enjoyed this video of these two long games. I know this is a long video today, but hopefully I gave some value and I showed you some good games. I really liked them both. Showed my attacking style in both, and showed how aggressive I am. You know, I'm not like scared to give up the exchange in that first game or to take a leap and put my king in a disastrous position. And I think that that's really important for my comeback in chess. That's going to happen probably in 7 to 10 months from now. I'm going to come back to chess for real in FIDE tournaments for the first time in 5 years. In that kind of style, that on-edge attacking style, that's going to work really well for me. So I'm going to have to build an opening repertoire that's even better than what I have now and just sync it to those attacking style moves, and also trying to pair with some strategy and positional chess, which are my weaknesses, which are what I have to work on and play. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm sending you a ton of love at home. See you soon.